Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN Network. We are continuing our Q episode coverage from the Fan Collective from 1987 to 2001. You might be going, wait a minute, Kyle, why are you in the captain's chair tonight? Well, Kevin had a little family thing going on tonight, so I gladly stepped in. Plus, it just gives me another excuse to make him clean the P corner later. So, guys, we're here to have fun. We are talking about the Q Fan Collective here, like I said, on the Union Federation podcast, on the Fandom Podcast Network, and the BQN. And if you're watching live here on YouTube, scan the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcast homepage where you can find all the great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, we got a great crew. I can't fly this ship alone. I haven't captained in a while. Kevin moved the buttons. He moved my drink coaster. I'm all messed up, which means I need to bring in our great ship counselor, our first officer, because I need a lot of counseling from all this. Of course, I'm talking about the wonderful Amy Nelson.
Well, hello. Let's self-regulate. Do some breathing exercises.
In, out. Well, now I'm hoping he's not going to come on here and ask, if he can impregnate anybody on the show and change everything because there's civil wars going on in his own dimension. But he's done a great job here for this entire run, and we're so glad to have him back on the Union Federation. Of course, that is our good friend, Gary.
Thank you. Those kind of requests I make in private messages. I don't do them on live stream if I'm going to be making requests.
We're thankful for that. If you brought a puppy to the podcast, I'd be really concerned.
No, I did wear gray. See tonight, get it? Yes. I wore gray because of what we're going to be talking about, and there you go.
Well, two, the crew isn't quite filled out yet because I need a top-notch science officer because always here on the Union Federation, we like to science the shit out of it. So the wonderful and talented Miss Haley Stoddard is back.
Hello. Spending time with you guys is way more fun than a one-celled organism and a targ, I have to say. So I am happy to be here. Glad to be back from the holiday break, and sick bay finally released me again. So I'm here.
Yeah. Quick, you just go there because the doctor,
I know. I do. It's very fun.
Yeah. Well, guys, this is the Fandom Podcast Network, and there's some other things that have been going on the Union Federation. I just want to catch you up on it if you're new to us or just haven't got a chance to listen in a while. Some of the stuff we've done over the past year, we had a great 10-part series on every 2-part episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. We had a blast with that. We revisited the Orville with some crew profiles. We had a great time with that. I only had to clean the P corner once during that run, so that wasn't too bad. And of course, too, we've covered other things. We had the Section 31 special. Sadly, the final season of Star Trek Lower Decks, I still miss it. I would love to see Mariner and Boimler and the gang come back one way or the other. And of course, season 3 of Strange New Worlds. And speaking of that, of Strange New Worlds, real quick, I did notice that there was a social media post. Christina Chong filmed her last scenes of Strange New Worlds over the weekend. Makes me a little sad, but we will be here to cover season 4 and season 5 when they happen. And of course, again, we are talking about today Star Trek Q episodes, the Q Collective. As we like to say, we've been covering all the episodes of Q from Star Trek The Next Generation, DS9, and tonight we'll be covering one of the great episodes from Voyager as well. We've had a blast doing all this. And of course, too, got to shout out Kevin's friend Joe Corney as his beautiful art, which hangs on Kevin's wall, commemorating Q as well. Now, guys, the Q Fan Collective, of course, it was this beautiful DVD set, which, of course, I'm the digital guy, so I don't actually have the physical media. Kevin's not here, but where you can see all his physical media. But if you're seeing it on the screen, you know exactly what I'm talking about with it. And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight with this episode. A little bit, we're going to talk about Q. We got the history of Q. If you go back to our first episode, we kind of get into the deals with everything with that. But guys, let's kick things off with our first away mission. So away mission number 1, guys, we're returning to Star Trek Voyager. We are in the Voyager run of Q now, so things are getting a little bit more interesting as we wrap up towards the end of the Q run in Star Trek. We will be covering tonight's episode is The Q and the Gray, which came out in 1996. I believe it was season 3 of Star Trek Voyager. And I am going to ask our wonderful first officer and counselor if she would mind reading the Admiral's Log episode synopsis for us.
All right. Well, this episode aired November 27th, 1996. And yes, it is the 11th episode in season 3. The IMDb rating, 7.1. And I will be talking about that later.
Uh-oh.
Look out now.
All right. So Q returns to Voyager with ovations towards wooing Captain Janeway in order to mate and produce offspring. Janeway doesn't buy it, but the matter indeed is more serious than Q lets on. The death of the other Q, aka Quinn, in their previous encounter has thrown the Q continuum off balance. Civil war has broken out, with the struggle adversely affecting the galaxy. Q's side is losing, but a child, to Q's way of thinking, may restore that balance. And mating with Janeway might be an infusion of new blood that the continuum needs. Then there's the other woman, Q's Q mate to consider.
Yeah. Q, you sly dog, you. Guys, we'll get into it a little bit more here, but just quick first thoughts on the episode here. Just general impressions on this. Is this episode bring back some memories? Returning to Voyager here. What did you guys quickly think of this episode? Because Amy, you actually had some strong thoughts with the IMDb rating.
Well, it seemed really high for me. The episode has a very rough start. It takes too long for Q to get to the point. I sort of would have liked that flipped. If I were to zhuzh it up, get to the point faster and then see more of the after effect of having this kid. Q just returns to let me play my game my way, and I'll tell you when you need to know type of business. And so he's up to his old hijinks.
Yeah. Haley, just a quick thought. Did you enjoy the episode, or was it?
I think after kind of the seriousness that is the previous Q episode, to go back to this lighterness, this low-key personality that we have in Q is kind of nice, with in mind this catastrophic notion, right? That we have this civil war and they're fighting and it's leading to all these supernova, right? And it's putting Voyager at risk. It's putting the whole galaxy, the whole universe at risk. And so there is this broader thing to consider, even though he's up to his old tricks, which it is kind of fun. I mean, he's trying to woo Kathy, as he calls her. And not going to lie, if my name was Catherine and someone called me Kathy and I didn't tell them that they could call me Kathy, that right there would just be like, nope, just stop.
Yep. So what Haley's saying is that knocks down her IMDb score even a little bit more.
A little bit, but it is a fun episode, and I'm sure the crew enjoyed having those costumes and wearing those, Civil War costume era. Wow, it had to have been fun.
It was an episode of cosplay for Star Trek, Gary.
Yes, my general thoughts is that there's a very different tone to this Q Voyager trilogy than any of the next gen episodes. The dynamic is different. The one we covered last week, Death Wish, was very serious and philosophical. This one's much more kind of comedic and at times almost sitcom-y. and it's just a totally different feel than the next gen, not just because the premise of the series is different for Voyager, but just the way that Q has been played in these last 2 episodes is very different from what we saw before.
I can definitely see that. Well, before we dive any deeper into the episode and get a little bit more deep in our thoughts, let's give everybody a little bit more education about this episode, because, guys, we have some Star Trek trivia. Miss Haley, I saw you raising your hand over there.
I want to read the first one.
Okay. We share and share like around here. Let's hit us up with the first piece of trivia, Haley.
Kate Mulgrew said the opening scene with Q was one of her personal favorites of the series, but admitted that between John de Lancie's over-the-top acting and the decor, she had some difficulty keeping her composure during the scene. I hands down agree. I love it. It's so funny.
Yeah. we talked about this a little last week too, because John de Lancie and Kate Mulgrew are very good friends, and it definitely shows in their scenes together, and I think it makes it a lot more fun. Miss Amy Nelson, can you give us the second piece of trivia?
Yes. So the title uses the American Civil War theme and plays upon the color of the North and the South's uniforms, blue and gray. The title is also a reference to the Civil War poem, The Blue and the Gray by Francis Miles Finch, and several television programs and movies with the same title.
There we go. Our third piece of trivia, this is always fun when we have a character who's played more than one character, an actress who's played more than one character in Star Trek, because the female Q's comment about liking Klingons because of their spunk is something of an in-joke. Susie Plaxton had previously portrayed Claire, another Klingon human hybrid, just like Yana Torres in TNG The Emissary and TNG Reunion. She has also played the Vulcan Lieutenant Solar, MD, in Star Trek The Next Generation, the Schizoid Man, and the Andorian Tara in Star Trek Enterprise Ceasefire.
Oh, I forgot she was in Enterprise.
Yeah, she is a Trek regular in there. So
yeah, that her comment was just so perfectly slid in there. Yeah.
Well, Kevin is taking a brief moment to join in the comments, and of course, Joel, we're always glad to have you as well. We're glad to see you have a minute to pop in, Kevin. Hope everything's going well and you're enjoying what I'm doing here, because it's a little shaky in the captain's chair. I'm a little nervous. I haven't been here in a while, but we're going to be good. And speaking of Kevin, this last piece of trivia is definitely a Kevin Reitzel special trivia, because Q confirms that the Romulan Star Empire once had and may still have an empress. And in this case, we might be referring to Donatra, I should say. The Empress
Donatra.
of the Donatra. Thank you, Amy. I'm
like Sinatra.
Yeah, there you go. But the Empress of the Imperial Romulan State is the head of government and the head of state of recently proclaimed Imperial Romulan State. The Imperial Romulan State's existence was first proclaimed by Donatra, a former commander in the Imperial fleet of the Romulan Star Empire in the late 2380s, who appointed herself the first Empress. Star Trek novel Articles of the Federation. Typhoon Pact novel Rough Beasts of the Empire is where this happens. There is no indication as to whether Donatra intended for the Imperial Romulan State to be matriarchal, but presumably the male head of state, if Donatra were to lose power, would be the Emperor of the Imperial Romulan State. So while making really no connection to this character, possibly who Q was referring to. And of course, she was played by the great Dina Meyer, who we know from Star Trek Troopers, as well as Beverly Hills 90210 and several other things, and is a personal favorite of mine and Kevin's. And as you can see here, Kevin has even had the opportunity to meet great Dina Meyer and get his Star Trek card autographed, because Kevin has every one of his Star Trek cards autographed, and we're very jealous of him. So a little bit of fun. Could it be connected? Maybe, maybe not, but we're going to find out. And then finally, guys, that wraps up the trivia. We hope we've educated you some, but let's get into our second away mission. Okay, guys, as we are talking about the Q and the Gray from 1996 on Star Trek Voyager, it's time to enter our mission reports here on our away missions. And as always, we are kicking things off with the Q of it all, with some of our favorite Q quotes from this episode. Guys, there's a few out there. I just want to start off with this one because I really enjoyed this one. You bar rodent by me. As Q refers to as Neelix. It's just typical Q, and just absolutely, no respect for anybody. And then, of course, he tries to change his ways. But guys, there's a few quotes up in the notes if you can see them. But do you have any favorite quotes from this episode, Mrs. Amy?
There's so many. That bar rodent one, that's pretty good. So again, going back to Q, his Q, the female Q. When you can see, K'Ehleyr a little bit in her portrayal of Q, and that sharpness and tartness to her voice and the tone and how she delivers it when she's on the bridge and it's after not Spock.
You mean like when she goes to Mr. Paris? You, Helm Boy.
Yeah, Helm Boy.
And she's like, the Vulcan talent for stating the obvious never ceases to amaze me. And just her delivery, like I'm telling you, again, Q one-liners, she delivers them just as well as John de Lancie.
Yeah, she's great.
What about you, Gary? Any favorite quotes?
My top one, Amy's right, there's several. My top one would be, my cosmic clock is ticking, which I thought was great. And I also liked foreplay with the Q can last decades, which I personally hope we spend the last half of this show analyzing, because I think we could talk about that for a long time. But and I also, I'll stick with 2 now because I don't want to inadvertently get something.
I don't know. I feel like I've been in relationships where foreplay lasted decades.
I have another one, but I'll wait to see what Haley says. I want to take one.
Haley, got a quote for me?
I don't necessarily have like a quote. I just really love that opening scene. Well, not the opening scene to the episode, but I really love when Janeway walks into her quarters because, Chakotay's like, you've been up here for 14 hours. Go get some rest. That whole interaction between them, she walks in and there's the bed with the heart-shaped headboard and red sheets, and just that whole interaction is fantastic. I beat out a single-celled organism. How flattering, and just the back and forth of like, oh, you're teasing me, and oh, you're playing hard to get now. Yes. And just it's just so well done. Yeah. I love it.
So my favorite line in that scene is when he says, there's no need to call room service, Kathy. I've already ordered.
That's
anticipating her every potential need or whim. I mean, at the snap of a finger is just, and it's hilarious that, he thinks that, he's in love with her and she's going to just fall head over heels for him. Well, it's hilarious. It's great.
He thinks he's simply irresistible. But also, guys, I got to talk about one of my favorite scenes in here, too, between Torres and the female Q. You aren't the first female who's ever had a man run out on her. I hope you're not complaining some failed romance in your pitiful existence to my eternal association with Q. I really had it with the superiority complex of yours. It's not a complex, dear. It's a fact.
Yeah.
Well, here's another fact. If you don't stop pestering me, I'm never going to finish, in which case your association with Q might not quite be as eternal as you think. Don't mess with the Klingon.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yep.
It won't end well. But those are a few of the Q quotes for this episode. But you know what? We got a lot of other great things to talk about here. So let's keep moving on into our next mission report. course, this is the main episode discussion. So we are returning to Star Trek Voyager here for this episode. And first off, Amy, Haley, you weren't here last week. I want to get your thoughts on just returning to Voyager. I don't know how long it's been since either of you guys have watched Voyager. It's been a while for me. Gary, I know you gave your thoughts last week, but Amy, what was it like for you to return to Voyager?
Oh man, so nice. First of all, the theme song, the intro, just woo, gotta love that. And I do love Janeway. And I do love this episodic getting back to, it's TNG part 2. So it's just so good. And oh boy, do they look young. Harry Kim. Oh, he's just so yeetle. Baby face. And Robbie Duncan McNeil, Paris. Wow. I'm just like, who are these? They have changed even from like season 6, season 3. But it was really good. Kes wasn't in this one, right? She was.
No, she was briefly in this one.
Yeah. So it was good to see Kes, knowing that. Yeah.
What about you, Haley? What was it like for you to return to Voyager?
So it's fun. I watched Voyager probably about 4 or 5 years ago, for the first time ever. And I really like it makes me go, okay, I need to go back and watch Voyager again. Just because there was so much that I kind of missed, I think, as I was speed running through it, so to speak. And so I think I need to get back to it. It is fun. I do enjoy it. The crew is really fun to watch. And I do enjoy this premise of like, what would happen if you're stuck out somewhere that no one's been before. And the previous episode with Q and Q tempting Janeway with like, hey, I can take you home if you side with me in an instant. And that decision that she had to make is pretty intense.
Yeah.
So I need to get back to watching Voyager again.
Amy, I see you raising your hand, or?
Oh no, I was scratching my
scratching your head. Okay. So Gary, we talked about returning to Voyager last week. So I'm going to just go to this point for you. Is there any of the subplots in this episode that grabbed you?
I'm trying to think of what a subplot would be that wasn't tied into the main plot. Actually, I will say this, because it seems like if we consider the main plot everything that was happening to Janeway and Q inside the continuum, I did really like the fact that, as opposed to the previous Q episode we discussed, where really the only interaction Q had was with Janeway, and to a far lesser extent Tuvok, who was really more the other Q, tied to the other Q. I really enjoyed the fact that in this one, Q interacted with more of the crew, which just did not happen in the previous. The scene with, he's interacting with Chakotay, with Harry and Tom in the holodeck. We mentioned the Neelix thing before, but I just really liked seeing Q not so focused just on Janeway, but can see how all the other characters react to him. I appreciated that.
I'm down for a Harry, Tom, and Q road trip episode. I think that's an interesting grouping right there, and I think it could be a lot of fun. Amy, was there any subplots or kind of underlying things going on outside of the main Q storyline that grabbed your attention? Or
well, no, but I am gonna give Gary credit for now making me appreciate the pre stuff a little bit more, because that pre stuff that I was complaining about, like I wish Q just would have been, all right, Catty, you're you're right. I just want to have a kid. And this is why, because but we needed that time with the crew as he was going around, like trying to get an angle to work in with Catherine. So I think you just changed my headcanon. Thanks, Gary.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. You know what, Amy, I just have to confess, I just really liked, if I was stuck on Voyager, that would be the holodeck program I'd be going into every day. So
yeah, I'm going to say I'm not going to think about the holodeck program. Haley, what about you? Any, outside of the main Q storyline, any subplots or things that might have happened with character interactions that you found interesting?
I liked that, as we get progressive in the main plot, we get the female Q is losing her powers. She's now got a bruise on her face. And so, yes, it's still in the main storyline of the Q continuum being at war with each other. But I like that they separated it and that she's stuck on Voyager and she's got to work with them and help her essentially get back to the Q continuum and rescue Q and Janeway and all of that. So I really liked that duality, that they didn't exclude that they included shots and scenes from that of her being stuck there.
I think those are all great points. But I mean, the truth of the matter, this episode had a huge A plot that really dominated the episode. And so let's talk about that in our next mission report. So guys, on this next mission report, I should say, we're talking about the main plot here, and specific to this episode, due to the death of Q in their last encounter with Voyager, a civil war has broken out among the Q continuum. A new Q needs to be produced, and the mischievous Q known to the USS Enterprise has chosen Janeway as his mate. Then Q's old girlfriend shows up. Never good. Never let the old girlfriend hang around and be able to find you. That's bad juju, guys. But just a lot of things happen in this episode as far as the Q continuum, and that's one of the things Voyager really did. We've got to see more of the Q continuum itself, I think, in Voyager than we did in any of the Next Gen episodes, really, and it gave us an idea of what was happening with the continuum. But I just kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on this main storyline. Amy, I want you to kick things off here, because it's a very interesting situation here where we're seeing the continuum an absolute mess, really.
Right. And okay, so we're just going to have a little math moment. Because what we learn, if I'm understanding Q correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that because Quinn left, there was an imbalance, i.e., and that already has major issues going on with my head. So there's an imbalance. So Q wants to bring in someone on his side to put it back into balance. The only way it's going to be imbalance is if it was split 50-50. And you're going to split something 50-50. That means it's finite. So the Q continuum is not infinite, that there is a X number of Q. Wow, that is weird. Some determined number of Q, and that it's exactly split in half. I just don't know what population is like that. And I also thought that the Q was infinite, that there were, I don't know. So the math aside, I like where he's thinking of trying to get it back into balance. I just didn't know that there was only a finite number of Q in the universe. I just thought that was new information.
Well, and like I said, I think that's where Voyager really dives into the continuum more. But Haley, Amy just mathed this up. Do you have some science that might go with this episode? Because there were a lot of supernovas going on. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I do find that interesting, that their battles create, which, I mean, it makes sense that their battles, if they are these omnipotent beings, that if they're fighting with each other, their battles would be seen on a cosmic level, and they would be these cosmic events. And perhaps, if things hadn't worked out, if they hadn't righted themselves, it could have been something as catastrophic as, you get a supernova. And there's two types. It can result in two different things. You can get a black hole, which is really bad. Or, you end up with this remnant from the star after it destroys and goes supernova. And it's a neutron star, and it's heavily dense, and it's very, very heavy. So, and they have determined that if two neutron stars collide with each other, those can also create a very powerful and big black hole. So you can only imagine, in this episode, we've had 3 very close to each other, at least in space time. And you can imagine that if that had continued, there would have been all these supernova. The waves would travel out really far, destroy other things, cause other things to move out of their rotation, interact with each other, collide with each other, because, body in motion stays in motion. So it would be really quite interesting to have seen what would have happened if this had continued. And I also like the idea that, when we get to where he takes Captain Janeway, and it looks very World War II, but the weapons that they're using are their weapons, but we are just perceiving it as World War II, is very interesting. And you can only imagine the devastation that their actual weapons cause, right? And so it's very, very interesting. To Amy's point, I'm also kind of like, okay, we have this finite group, which in some sense makes a lot of sense, because they've never really said, like, we're omnipotent, but they've never really stated before, like, exactly how many there are. They've alluded maybe that there's millions of them, but we never really actually know. And so in this episode, it makes sense that, there's only a certain number of Q, just like there is only a certain number of every single race of being that we've encountered so far in Star Trek. And so that kind of makes sense. I find the notion of, to end the Civil War, if we have a baby, that ends the war. And I think that is, for me, that's the part where I'm like, really? Okay. Because you never know. This baby could grow up and be like, okay, I'm not going to be a philosopher type Q. I'm going to be the other type of Q, which would then still keep it out of balance if they're looking for balance. Yeah. So that concept just makes no sense to me. The only thing I can think of is that they have to bring in another Q, because maybe there is supposed to be a set number of Q.
Right.
And that's how it was out of balance. It doesn't matter whether one's a philosopher and they're not. It's just that there has to be a set number of Q. And because the previous Q that we encountered dies, that's what threw it out of balance, which is also very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Joel brings up a point. Do we now think the baby is Trelane too?
No, because this is after TOS.
Yeah. True.
Trelane is just the very first Q that we encounter that we all consider a Q, but wasn't actually a Q at the time.
Right.
And then he had his parents, and he was a baby Q. And so I think, who knows? But.
Okay, I like your idea of that it doesn't have to be sides, but just a set number. And so that it's not that number. That's what makes it. I can see that. Yeah.
Like there has to be like 100 Q. And if there's not 100 Q, then somehow that causes problems, which we never really understand, like why. They're just at war with each other because the one Q killed himself, and then
okay, I just now might have ruined this. So Gary,
wait, what do you mean?
Because this whole being out of balance. Go back, Amanda from TNG is a Q.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Amanda later too.
Because she's new.
Yeah.
Yep.
So have we been out of balance and Quinn now put it in balance by leaving?
Or could have been we're out of balance because Riker denied his Q power, and then that's really screwed.
There you go.
Want to go that far back. But Gary, I want to get your thoughts about the main storyline here.
I wanted to make sure my opinion on what they were putting out about the Q was exact. So I went to the transcript. And Janeway says, talking about Quinn, Janeway said, "You said it would represent an interruption to the continuum." And Janeway says, "His death caused this conflict." And Q says, "It caused chaos and upheaval because even though he was gone, his calls for freedom and individualism continued to echo in the ears of those who believed in his teachings, myself among them. I sounded the trumpet and carried the banner. Others followed." And he says, "Now there's a cosmic struggle for supremacy." So because I wanted to make sure I wasn't misperceiving it, it seemed like they're saying it wasn't about Quinn's numerical death. It was more that his philosophy split. The people took sides because of the philosophy. And about the baby, Jamie says, "I don't see how a baby's going to end a war of omnipotent beings." And Q says, "Mating will create a new breed of Q, which will combine my omnipotence and infinite intellect with the best that humanity has to offer. What the continuum needs right now is an infusion of fresh blood, a new sensibility, a new leader, a new Messiah." So I think actually what that is testimony to, because of his interaction with Picard, how highly Q now regards humanity, that he wants to use what he considers the best of humanity as the potential salvation of the Q. Maybe.
But then his solution with the female Q doesn't even make sense because she's not new blood.
Yeah.
And she's not humanity. She is Q.
Right.
But I think, can I throw this in there too? I think because the Q never had a baby in the continuum before. I think they've always pulled people in. Nobody's had a baby. So maybe a baby growing up from the start is something that's different. Even if it's 2Q, it's still going through a different experience that no Q has probably gone through with that power and within the continuum itself.
And I also think that even at that point, Q was saying, okay, well, you're right, Amy, to your point, a Q and a Q is not human, but that's why that to me was the point of the very end scene where he says, that's why we want Aunt Kathy to be the godmother so that you could, teach him love and compassion and conscience and all that stuff. That's what we're going to rely on you for. So maybe he had that in mind. I don't know, when he agreed to mate with the female Q. What I was going to say about Amanda is I get why they didn't want to mention or bring in Amanda in this series, because it happened on another series. They would have to do a quick summary backstory if they even mentioned Amanda of who she was. I think, let's say Next Gen had kept going and they would have done the Q Civil War in Next Gen. I absolutely think that Amanda's presence, who had spent her life with humans and had a true purpose in life before she became Q, knows what she wanted to accomplish, that would have been her presence there, probably would have been the instigator of the Civil War had this played out on TNG, because then it would have been still from an episode that TNG fans would be familiar with.
Right. Yeah.
But I get why they didn't want to do that here.
I think all really good points you guys have brought up. I think the interesting thing too with this story, and I give the Star Trek writers a lot of credit, deciding to dive more into the continuum itself in Voyager, I think was the right idea. instead of just giving us more typical Q episodes from Next Generation with the Voyager crew, it really changed things up, and it gave us another different perspective on the Q in general. And I think that we were at a point where it's good that we were learning more about the Q and the continuum as well, because I think as we get later on into Picard and things, knowing this information really helps, and it kind of helps us see our perspective, and maybe we look at Q a little bit differently. And I think it really did have some effect on that as well. With this episode too, I mean, I get why they played it up with like the Civil War thing, because that would be something typical of the Q continuum. I kind of wish though we could have seen something that wasn't a moment in the continuum that maybe wasn't part of the Civil War, maybe just a different look as they reach peace or something like that. But I get it, and I have a feeling they all had a lot of fun doing a Civil War reenactment too. So just don't give me one of those Q weapons. Too powerful for me. I trouble would happen. But guys, let's go into our final mission report here, because we got to talk about the Q of it all. And for that, what are some of our favorite Q scenes? So, guys, we love our Q. What are some of our favorite Q scenes from this episode? Haley, you got a big old smile going, so I'm gonna...
I do. The puppy. I'm sorry if I was Janeway and I'm in my office and I hear a sound and there's this puppy. I'm sorry. I'm done for. Yeah. I'm done for. Like the puppy. He's like, but look at this face. And I'm like, I am looking at the face and it's so cute.
Well, Voyager needed a puppy.
Oh, Voyager needed the puppy. Yeah,
I almost kind of at the end wanted her to go back in her office, and that was like the last gift from Q was the actual puppy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been good. Amy, any favorite Q scenes? Moments?
I'm trying to look at the images here. I really did like the Civil War. I liked it. And it was what made it real and not the holodeck or anything, like was when he got injured and you see the blood on his hands. And I'm like, oh, this just got real. And it's like, well, and so then it's like, okay, yeah, these weapons, it's really happening, but we're seeing it through this lens. I really do enjoy that mind mess that we get with Voyager.
I think that's a great point too, Amy. What about you, Gary? Any favorite Q scenes or moments?
My favorite scene, which was more like a sequence, I loved when the crew showed up in the battle. There's Chakotay, Paris, Tuvok, Harry, all in the different Civil War colors. They're shooting at everything. It's like, Harry, you go back around the back and try to rescue the captain. And there's the female Q having to pick up her, what do you call it? It's not a trousseau, but what is it where you have to pick up the dress to run?
Petticoat and everything.
Petticoat. Yeah. And it was more like an action scene where the female Q was actually, down there kind of getting into it and kind of helping them out. I just loved the fact that the entire crew was involved in this episode. That's what I really missed in the previous one. And also, the reason I actually honestly think that I liked that sequence, I wish it was longer because I was really getting into it and it just kind of had to end quickly. I actually enjoyed this more than what I think is probably the most analogous scene in TNG, which was the Robin Hood thing, where they're all in the Robin Hood thing. But in that one, Q had his powers and he could have just snapped and gotten them all out of there. There was no real stakes almost. In this, the fact that the crew is there, they're shooting, they're in danger, Q's in danger, Janeway's in danger. The stakes on this kind of similar scene here for me were a lot higher because, it wasn't just something that, a finger snap could get them out of. I just wish it had played out longer because I was enjoying it so much.
That makes sense. Joel brings up the Civil War stuff ties in with TNG when Q is dressed like the field marshal. The Q do like their cosplay.
They do. Good callback, Joel.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I have two favorite scenes. I love the scene on the holodeck. Just Q trying to get male bonding and male advice from Paris and Kim, which, yeah, you really want relationship advice from Tom Paris. I'm just saying.
Right.
I'm just
or
saying.
Harry.
Yeah, I mean, that's when he should be pulling the Riker card, maybe. I don't know, but and then like Haley, I'm like you. I love the opening scene when Janeway walks into her quarters and Q's got everything going, and just the whole interaction between the two of them, and him calling her Kathy and the way he's doing it, and just making all these instant assumptions, and her rejecting him, and he's like in shock over it. I think it was just a fun scene, and again, this goes back to the chemistry between Kate Mulgrew and John de Lancie because of their friendship, and they just click on like nothing, and it's just so much fun to watch when those two just start sparring verbally. It's great. Amy,
I think Q should have had Barry White music playing though.
Oh yeah.
But then the whole episode wouldn't fall because of it's Barry White who can resist.
Exactly.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
So I do want to give props to the, as you guys keep calling it, the holodeck scene with Harry, Kim, and Tom Paris getting massages. And if you notice at the very end scene, there is this hunk of a man in a Speedo. I'm like, humana. I'm like, what? Paying attention. I don't know what was going on.
I didn't notice that.
Oh, I did. And then he was like walking towards us, and then the female in uniform, and then he was following her off the screen. I'm like, that's right. It's good for the goose, good for the gander.
So what that tells us is that at some point in his career, when the Voyager got back, Tom Paris wrote holodeck programs that were probably really popular. But guys, we are talking about the Q and the Gray here, and in our final mission report, we kind of tend to hit topics that maybe we didn't cover. And I have one topic that I think we should have a little conversation about, because I think it's a very big dangling plot thread from this episode. Q makes Janeway the godmother of his son. Mm-hmm. How did they not have an episode that just plays up on that? Because, we're like Q, maybe the kids like 10, 11 now, or kind of being a little bratty. Q can't deal with him anymore, so he leaves him with Auntie Janeway, godmother Janeway, for a babysitting episode. Because, come on, that would have been just fun. And it would be very interesting to see the actual effect that Janeway would have on this Q child, as along with the rest of the crew. I don't know if I'm letting my the Q son hanging out with Uncle Tom and Uncle Harry either. That might lead to some trouble there. But I mean, what do you guys think? Is this a completely missed opportunity here that we did not get something with this? Gary, you're nodding your head over there.
I am, but the only thing I would change about your premise, don't make it 10 or 11, because that's kind of close to what we're going to get next time. I would have kept him maybe 2.5, and see the baby, have the crew deal with a 2-year-old Q running around. I mean, of course it would be like a comedy episode, which would be fine. But that would be great. It's Janeway's trying to be the godmother, and the kid's running around causing all kinds of chaos. Maybe he gets maybe some other force kidnaps the baby, and the crew has to go save the baby, something like that. I don't know, but just the idea of a 2-year-old Q running around would be great.
Amy, what are you thinking on this? Did they miss the boat here?
Well, again, I think they have a hard time with children because they're aging, and then what? You get to some age and then you automatically stop because you're going around. And Joel in the comments was like, well, the Q move around in time. So is there a point where Qs get really, really old? yeah, are you going to live forever? And then are you continually aging? Because if you're aging as a baby, as a 2-year-old, as a 5-year-old, you are literally aging. Then when do you stop? Like, I don't, it's just that thing making me think about it. It ruins it for me just a little, but it doesn't, but they do it a lot with like Baby Borg or, and it's like all of a sudden they just stop.
Well, I would like to think in the Q's case, they can probably control their aging, how they look and their aging a little bit.
Well, then why is a baby?
Well, I think in this case, that's part of the Q issue here. But Gary?
Right.
Well, no, I was just going to food for thought. Maybe the fact that if this is the first Q baby, it's different rules. Maybe you could say, well, if this is like this is the first of a new type of being, even for the Q, then who knows how, maybe it does need to go through natural aging. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching, but
it's just,
I don't know.
It's a tough
Come
episode.
on, Auntie Haley, are you up for babysitting your Q godchild?
That would be rough. I've worked with a lot of children, so I don't know if I'd want one that had powers that was also being bratty. So, to Amy's point about the age, so if we go back to TOS, we learn that Trelane, he's like 900 and something years old, but he's still considered a baby. And to Kevin's point about like being able to control their physical features and how they look physically, I think of, there's a book series that I read, and they've made a lot of scientific advances in these books, and people can live into their hundreds but still look like they're maybe like in their 60s. So they can look younger than they actually are, than their actual age, right? And so I kind of think of it in that regard, where the Q maybe choose to look a certain age when they encounter humanoid beings, right? Because we all age and we have that experience, but the Q necessarily don't, because we don't know what they look like when they're just gallivanting or when they're in the continuum. We see it from our perspective,
right? Like we did the Civil War.
Yeah. But we don't actually know what they actually look like to each other.
Very good.
And so I think, and obviously they age quickly, right? And maybe they get to a certain age, and it just, their aging is faster than ours. And so that's how I chalk that up. But yeah, I do think it could have been an episode where we would have gotten Janeway and crew, having at least, maybe not the A plot, but the B plot is, they're taking care of this, toddler Q. Like Joel says. Exactly, Joel. So, when they encounter us, or other humanoid species, the Romulans, the Vulcans, they choose to put on a certain image, but we don't actually know what they actually look like.
Oh, okay.
That's a good point. Gary?
Really, really quickly, I just realized that probably what I want is, if they do a babysitting episode, I want the plot to manipulate such that it's the Doctor and B'Elanna who end up having to deal with the kid. I don't know why that combination. Maybe the kid accidentally zaps them off the ship onto another planet or somewhere, and the three of them are stuck. That combination just strikes me that would be like comedy gold, to have B'Elanna and the Doctor have to deal with this all-powerful toddler.
There you go. So, well, guys, we're going to move on here because we're going to talk about the MVP of this episode. Yes, as always, we have our MVP, or sometimes in English, as Amy has brought up in the past, the LVP of this episode. And of course, on this episode, we are talking about the cast of Star Trek Voyager. And so people we haven't seen for a while here. And it is a pretty good cast. Of course, we've got all of our regular Voyager crew, but we also have some guest stars as well, including Susie Plaxton, we talked about a little bit earlier, Harv Presnell as Colonel Q, and just some great Voyager crew fun as well. Now, real quick, I do want to actually, before he had to take off, leave his choice of MVP, and I'm going to start with that here first because he went with Q herself. Yes, that's right. Susie Plaxton was his choice for MVP of this episode, and guys, I can definitely see that pick. She had a lot of fun in this episode, but there's so many to choose from. So, Amy, who's your MVP, or do you have an LVP this week?
No, this one is definitely Susie Plaxton. I'm glad I get to go first because I'm taking her. She's freaking amazing, and the callback is amazing as well. She pulls it off. Her attitude, her spunk is the exact right personality for Q. So definitely my valuable player.
Well, before we go any further, Joel weighed in for his MVP.
Oh,
that was going to be my pick, Joel. But
I know, Joel. I was actually going to say that. The puppy
Haley
for the
was
win.
Yeah, puppy always wins here. But Gary, who is your pick for the MVP?
Okay, I'm going to have to go with my number 2 because I agree with Amy that Susie Plaxton was just dynamite in this episode. Everything about her body language, her tone, her looks, everything. I mean, if ever, I wish that we'd seen the character again because we just did not get enough of the female Q, or the old ball and chain as Q calls it.
You hear that over and over. We did not get enough Kalar. We did not get Dr. Nurse Sela. Like just Susie Plaxton. We did not get enough of her.
Yeah, no, I mean, she's tremendous in any role that she takes on. I mean, and which shows she's so versatile. I mean, how many different races can she do? And she makes each one different and distinct. So Susie Plaxton, we all value you. So except for, so without her, I'm going to go ahead and say John de Lancie with a caveat, which is that I thought that his chemistry with Janeway in this was good, but it was so good that and it was so easy that a lot of times I drifted out from like seeing them as Janeway and Q. I thought, oh, this is Kate Mulgrew and John de Lancie having a ball and doing, you know what I mean? It's like they were so good that I lost track of them as characters. I saw them as like, and weirdly enough, like the actors just going at it, full force. But he was good, especially not so much like in the sitcom-y, I want her to fall in love with me part, but more when he's talking about, getting serious and talking about what's going on with the Q. And for the final scene, I mean, come on. I don't know if he was related to that baby, but I mean, that was a great scene.
Haley, your MVP?
My MVP, I'm also giving it to John de Lancie. I think I just love his interactions with everybody in this episode. And, Amy points out that she didn't like that we didn't get to the point very long. I liked that it was a little more dragged out, that it wasn't so immediate and in your face as to why he was there. And because in all the other previous episodes, I mean, it's pretty quick. You understand why Q is there. And I liked that this one was a little bit more drawn out. And I appreciated it. And I liked this notion that he himself was so deeply impacted by the previous episode that we had with Q, that he said, you know, what that Q told him hit him and impacted him, that he was this trickster, and then he got in trouble and he became human and lost his powers, and then he was changed and he wasn't his normal self anymore. And I really liked that he took that lesson to heart and changed himself. And yes, it caused the civil war amongst the Q, but I really like that because it shows some type of growth as opposed to just always staying the same, which is obviously what all the other Q have just done, is they've just been the same for millennia, and they're not interesting anymore, and they don't talk to each other, and they don't interact, and they, you know, they just don't do what they normally did. And I really liked that idea. I'm also going to have a runner up with Harvey Presnell. I liked him in this episode. I know it was a small part, but I really appreciate any time I get to see him. I really liked him. He was in Patch Adams. That's one of my favorite Robin Williams movies. He was in Saving Private Ryan, which I also just deeply love. And so it was nice to see him just kind of come on screen just for that little bit, because I couldn't picture somebody else being in that role. He just fits that era of like, I'm going to play in a Civil War movie. So I'm going to play this, you know, colonel in this Civil War scene, and oh, you're both going to die. And Janeway's like, wait, what?
Well, you guys have kind of picked everybody who I had lined up, but I kept wanting to reserve because I do think Kate Mulgrew was amazing in both the last episode we talked about in this episode, and it the big reason why is because of Janeway's relationship with Q and how it is so different than Picard's, and it's not just because you have this male-female dynamic where Picard gets frustrated with Q and is trying to figure Q out. Janeway just seems to have this calmness with Q. She doesn't let Q get her too rattled. And I find that interesting. And I think because of Q's fascination with Janeway in a totally different way, and I think it's because Q sees Janeway not getting rattled. Like he knew he could still rattle, even though all the respect he had for Picard, he knew he could get Picard frustrated. And he can't seem to do that to Janeway. And then he gets more infatuated with her. And I think obviously those two play off each other so well and have such great chemistry. But in both last episode and in this episode, Janeway's carrying the burden of some major things happening and having to make decisions for this omnipotent race that can't seem to get their crap straight. And in the last episode, she's being the arbiter and trying to figure out the decision for Quinn. In this episode, she's trying to get them to realize there's a peaceful solution to this without killing and destroying the universe, and getting Q to realize certain things. And I think she does a brilliant job at it when you're considering who she's dealing with. And I think they wrote it very well, and she portrayed it incredibly well as also. But in truth, the puppy wins the MVP.
Yes. Well, we all kind of agree on that.
Yeah.
Well, guys, let's warp out of here and get to some of our final thoughts for the episode. Again, you have been watching the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. And of course, you can also listen to this great podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network audio feed, as well as the BQN audio feeds. We've been continuing our Star Trek Q fan collective series. We've had a lot of fun with it. We got one more to go, and then it's going to be a little sad. Our time with Q will be over for a while. I'm a little bummed. I always need more Q in my life, even though he causes havoc most of the time. But it's still fun.
Unless he shows up at Starfleet Academy.
Oh, that's you never know. But I want to get your final thoughts on the episode, Gary. I'm going to let you kick things off with your final thoughts on this episode.
My final thought basically is going to focus on the final scene, which is, I understand why in real world terms the show's got to keep going for another X seasons, and this is just the third season. But the fact that it isn't actually addressed niggled at me, because the ending of of this episode, to me, begs the question: if Q and Janeway are on, at that point, such good terms, I mean, Janeway gave Q the solution to ending the war and saving the continuum. Why doesn't he help Voyager get home? I understand after Death Wish, because the future of the continuum was uncertain. Janeway made a decision that Q didn't like because he didn't really have control over it. He wasn't sure what's going to happen, even though Q did play a role in Quinn's assisted suicide. But still, at that point, Janeway, had been butting heads with him all during that, the events of that episode. So I get that. But here, it's totally opposite. He regards Janeway. I think he has sincere respect and esteem for her. She helped him. She saved the whole continuum, basically. Why he doesn't say, okay, here's my gift to you, Auntie Kathy. Boom. I get it. We're only in season 3. But still, that to me, in terms of the premise, is like a huge hole that there's no good explanation for why Q wouldn't come forth at that point and do that.
I think I might have an answer for you on that, though, Gary, because in the episode, Janeway says, we're going to get home, but we're going to do it our way with our work ethic and how we do things. And I think Q has so much respect for Janeway that he almost goes, okay, do it your way. Plus, come on, let's be honest here. Q thinking is probably like, well, if I keep her out here, who knows what else I can do with her while she's trying to figure out back home. But I do think that's part of it, is that he's got that much respect for Janeway that when she says, we're going to do it ourselves, we're going to find our own way home, he kind of takes that aback and goes, okay. I mean, I'm just saying, I agree with you on that aspect, but I think that's at least part of it.
Right.
But Amy, what about you? What are your final thoughts on the episode?
Well, my final thought is going to get back to that IMDb rating. I sincerely think that 7.1 is too generous of a score, especially when you look at previous Q episodes that aren't this bad. Or wait, aren't this good? Wait, which way am I going? I lost my train.
Not great.
Yeah, and this is getting a 7.1. I just think it's a little too high. Good episode. I would give it a 6.8, 6.7, very fair. 6.8 generous because, because of Susie Plaxon. How about that?
Yeah.
But that's where I feel it should be. But yeah, I think it's a fine episode. Definitely, it's given me a lot to think about the Q continuum overall. That's for sure.
Haley, final thoughts.
Yeah, again, I think the episode is enjoyable. It makes you think about, the Q continuum and the Q and how many more other Q are there and everything. So I think that is nice for adding to the story and the background of the Q. It's nice to get that, and I really appreciate this episode for that reason, just because we don't have that otherwise. So yeah, and there's a puppy.
It gets an extra point on IMDb for the puppy, Amy.
Okay.
So as for me, I mean, this is a okay Q episode. It's not one of the best, not by far. Again, I think you can look at it and give it value because of what it does as far as teaching us about the continuum and seeing those things. It's always great having de Lancie and Mulgrew play off of each other. That's a great dynamic. But I just feel like it was an average episode too. I mean, it's just as far as an episode of Trek, it was there. And so I agree with Amy. 6.8 seems about right for me on this episode, but I think it is an important episode too, because of what we learn. And again, it's always fun to see John de Lancie hamming it up as Q when he acts like this. So it was a fun episode. The best, not. It's probably in the lower part of these 12 episodes, but it is what it is. And you know what? We still had enjoyment out of it, and we obviously were able to find some great things to talk about it tonight. But guys, let's start wrapping things up here on the Union Federation, because there's other stuff we've got to do too. But let's talk about, this was the episode The Q and the Gray, and we're going to be continuing next week with Star Trek Voyager episodes, our final episode of this great fun Q ride we have been on for the last 12 weeks. And we're going to be covering Star Trek Voyager from 2001 Q2. So get going, get on your Paramount Plus, get your DVDs out, watch it so you're ready for next week as we wrap things up with our Q fan collective. But guys, this has been the Union Federation podcast. Let's hit a little bit of subspace signal before we go. Okay, it's the Fandom Podcast Network. It's the BQN Network. It's Union Federation. Miss Nelson, you are the queen of the BQN. You've been assimilating things all year long, but what are you assimilating lately on the BQN?
Well, we have gotten back to our All Good Things, and that has been very fun. Our Trek Masters is still going on, and when we get Starfleet Academy, we will get our Infinite Diversity back on track. So go check us out at BQN Podcasts. We are on Instagram and on Blue Sky and on Facebook, so you can find me there.
Haley, where can people find you out there in the social media world these days?
You can find me on Instagram and on Blue Sky. I am at Trekkie01D.
Gary, where can people find you?
You can find me on X at Gary A_retro. You can find me on Facebook as Gary Akers. You can also find me on the FPN on Thursdays, talking Doctor Who with Dan Hadley and gang on Type 40. And you can also find me on the Sci-Fi Chronicles on Sundays talking Stargate.
And don't worry, what Gary may not realize yet is we're still slowly assimilating him more and more into the Fandom Podcast Network. So, we'll get you a cool eyepiece at some point.
Ooh, thank you.
Of course, you can find Kevin out there on the social medias at Spartan_Phoenix, and of course, all over the Fandom Podcast Network social medias as well. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Blue Sky. You can find us on Instagram at FanPod Network. You can find me, Kyle, on Facebook at all our great pages for the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at @KyleW, and on Instagram at Threads at @KyleFandom. And of course, too, guys, got to mention TeePublic. It's the holiday season too. You might need a little stocking stuffer or something out there. Haley's got that great FPN mug she's holding up there, but all kinds of sales at TeePublic. I believe either today or tomorrow is the last day you can order and get gifts by the time they will arrive for Christmas. But, you can get your Union Fed gear, your shirts, your mugs, your hats, as well as all the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. We love the support. We love to see you guys in our gear. Yes, we get a little kickback here to keep the warp cell filled and charged, and the dilithium crystals. They're not cheap, guys. Inflation, tariffs, all that good stuff. It's crazy these days. But we have a great time with it. We appreciate all the support. tpublic.com, type in the name of your favorite show or type in the Fandom Podcast Network, and you're going to find all kinds of goodies on tpublic.com. And again, guys, this has been Star Trek Voyager, the Q and the Gray. Kevin should be back next week. If he gets the P corner cleaned up properly, I'm going to have everybody inspect it. But so, Kevin, it's on you, man. But we miss you. We'll hope to have you back in the captain's chair next week. And guys, as always, it's been a blast working with the wonderful crew here of the Union Federation. And as we like to close out here, live long and prosper. And without a doubt, we are most definitely the craziest ship on the fleet. Guys, we will see you next time here on the Union Federation podcast. Have a great day.